It was supposed to be a fun weekend getaway for a group of 5 friends. They rented a remote cabin in the woods to escape their busy lives and enjoy each other's company. But as soon as they arrived, something felt off. The cabin was old and musty, and the surrounding forest was eerily quiet. Still, the friends tried to make the best of it. They cracked open some beers and started a fire in the fireplace. But as the night wore on, they began to hear strange noises outside. "What was that?" asked Jen, one of the friends, as she looked towards the window. "I don't know, probably just some animal," said Jack, trying to reassure everyone. But as the night went on, the noises grew louder and more frequent. They heard twigs snapping, leaves rustling, and what sounded like heavy breathing outside. They were all too afraid to go outside and investigate, so they huddled together inside the cabin, waiting for morning. Just as they were starting to doze off, they heard a loud bang on the door. They all jumped up in fear, their hearts pounding in their chests. "Who's there?" yelled Alex, another friend. No answer. "Seriously, who's there?" she repeated, trying to sound brave. Suddenly, the door burst open and a creature lunged inside. It was tall and muscular, with razor-sharp claws and glowing red eyes. Its skin was covered in fur, and it emitted a foul odor. The friends screamed and scattered, trying to find somewhere to hide. But the creature was too fast and too strong. It quickly caught up to them, slashing at them with its claws. They tried to fight back, but nothing seemed to hurt it. They were trapped, with no way to escape. As they cowered in fear, they realized that this was no ordinary creature. It was a monster, something they never could have imagined existed. And it was stalking them, waiting to strike again. "We need to get out of here," whispered Emily, one of the friends. "But how?" asked Jack, his voice trembling with fear. They looked around the cabin for something, anything, that could help them. But all they found were some old hunting rifles and a few rounds of ammunition. "We have to try," said Alex, loading one of the rifles. They huddled together and made a plan. They would wait for the creature to come back, and when it did, they would fight back with everything they had. Hours passed, and the creature didn't return. The friends were exhausted, but too afraid to sleep. They stayed up all night, waiting for the monster to strike again. As morning approached, they realized that they had survived the night. The creature was gone, and they were alive. But they knew they would never forget what they had seen, and what they had gone through. They packed up their things and left the cabin, vowing never to return. They never spoke about the monster again, but they knew that it was still out there, waiting for its next victims. And they knew that they were lucky to have survived. As they walked out of the cabin, they were all silent, processing what had just happened. They walked to their cars and quickly got in, not wanting to waste any more time in that place. "Does anyone know what that thing was?" asked Emily, breaking the silence. "No idea," replied Jen. "I've never seen anything like it." "I don't care what it was," said Alex, her voice still shaky. "I just want to get as far away from here as possible." They drove for hours, not stopping until they were far away from the cabin and the creature that haunted it. They finally found a small town and decided to stay in a motel for the night. They were all still on edge, jumping at every sound they heard. They tried to distract themselves with TV and games, but they couldn't shake the memory of the monster. "I can't believe we made it out alive," said Jack, finally breaking the silence. "I thought we were done for," added Emily. "We were lucky," said Jen, "but we need to be careful. Who knows what other creatures are out there?" The friends all nodded, realizing that they had underestimated the dangers of the wilderness. They promised to never take their safety for granted again. As they went to bed that night, they were all still afraid. But they were also grateful to be alive, and grateful for each other. They knew that they had been through something that would bond them forever. And as they drifted off to sleep, they all had the same thought: they hoped that the monster would never find them again. The next day, the friends woke up feeling a little better. The sun was shining, and the small town they were in seemed peaceful. They decided to grab breakfast at a local diner and talk about what had happened. "I still can't believe that thing was real," said Jack, sipping his coffee. "I know, right?" replied Emily. "It was like something out of a horror movie." "Do you think there are more of them out there?" asked Jen, looking worried. "I don't know," said Alex, "but we need to be prepared. We can't let our guard down." They finished their breakfast and headed back to their cars. They were about to drive off when they noticed a man standing outside the diner, staring at them. He was tall and muscular, with a gruff appearance. They couldn't see his face, as he was wearing a hooded sweatshirt. "Who's that?" asked Emily, pointing to the man. "I don't know," said Jack, "but let's get out of here." As they drove away, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. They tried to put it out of their minds and focus on getting home. But as they drove, they noticed something strange. The same hooded man seemed to be following them. They saw him in their rearview mirrors, always a few cars behind them. "Is that guy following us?" asked Jen, her voice trembling. "It looks like it," said Alex, her eyes fixed on the man behind them. "What should we do?" asked Emily, starting to panic. "We need to lose him," said Jack, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. They drove faster, taking sharp turns and making sudden stops. But the man seemed to be always one step behind them. They were starting to get desperate when they saw a police car up ahead. "Quick, let's tell the cops," yelled Jen, pointing to the car. They drove up to the police car and explained everything to the officer. He looked at them skeptically but agreed to follow them and investigate. They drove for a few more miles, and when they looked back, the hooded man was gone. "Where did he go?" asked Emily, looking around. "I don't know," said Jack, "but we need to be careful. That guy gave me a bad feeling." The police officer took their information and promised to keep an eye out for the man. The friends finally breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that they had some protection. As they drove back to their homes, they couldn't help but feel grateful for each other's company. They knew that they had been through something terrifying, but they had come out of it stronger. And they also knew that they would never forget the monster that had haunted them in the remote cabin. It was a reminder that there were things in this world that they could not explain or understand. But they also knew that they had each other, and that was enough to get them through anything. Days turned into weeks, and the friends started to put the memories of the cabin and the hooded man behind them. They went back to their normal lives, but they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. One night, Jen was alone in her apartment, reading a book. She heard a noise outside and looked out the window. To her horror, she saw the hooded man standing on the street, staring up at her window. Jen's heart raced as she backed away from the window. She could feel the fear creeping up on her, and she knew that she had to do something. She picked up her phone and called the only people she knew could help her, her friends. "Guys, you won't believe it," said Jen, her voice trembling. "The hooded man is outside my apartment." "What?" exclaimed Emily, "are you sure?" "Yes, I saw him with my own eyes," said Jen, her voice rising. "We're on our way," said Jack, "just hang in there." Jen tried to stay calm, but she could feel her pulse racing. She kept her eyes on the hooded man, who was still staring up at her window. When her friends arrived, they found Jen huddled in the corner of her living room, her eyes fixed on the window. They could see the fear in her eyes and knew that they had to act fast. "We need to call the police," said Alex, picking up her phone. But before she could dial, they heard a loud banging on the front door. They all froze, not knowing what to do. "Who's there?" yelled Jack, his voice shaking. There was no answer, only more banging. They could hear the sound of someone trying to force the door open. "We need to barricade the door," said Jen, grabbing a chair. They quickly moved the furniture in front of the door, trying to keep the hooded man out. But they knew that it wouldn't hold for long. "What do we do now?" asked Emily, looking around the room. "We need to fight back," said Jack, his voice firm. They all looked at him, surprised by his sudden confidence. But they knew that he was right. They couldn't just sit there and wait for the hooded man to come in. They grabbed anything they could find, chairs, lamps, books, and prepared to defend themselves. The banging on the door grew louder, and they could hear the sound of glass breaking. The hooded man was trying to get in through the window. They braced themselves for the worst, ready to fight for their lives. But when they heard a loud crash, they knew that something had gone wrong. They cautiously approached the window and saw that the hooded man had fallen down the fire escape. They could hear him groaning in pain as he tried to get up. "Let's go," said Jack, "we need to get out of here before he recovers." They all grabbed their things and rushed out of the apartment. As they drove away, they could see the hooded man lying on the ground, his hood fallen off, revealing his face. They all gasped in shock as they recognized him. It was the owner of the cabin they had stayed in. He had been the one stalking them all along. They drove away, grateful to be alive but also haunted by the memories of what they had been through. They knew that they would never forget the monster that had followed them, and they also knew that they would never take their safety for granted again. As they drove in silence, Jack broke the silence. "We need to call the police and report what happened. We can't let him do this to anyone else." Everyone nodded in agreement, still in shock from what they had just experienced. They drove to the nearest police station and reported everything that had happened. The police quickly sprang into action and searched the cabin. They found evidence of the hooded man's presence, including hidden cameras and recordings of their conversations. The owner of the cabin was arrested and charged with stalking and attempted assault. The friends were relieved that justice was served, but the trauma they experienced would stay with them for a long time. Months later, the friends had moved on with their lives, but the memories of that night still haunted them. They stayed in touch and often talked about what happened, trying to make sense of it all. One day, Jen received a package in the mail. It was a letter from the hooded man, apologizing for what he had done and asking for forgiveness. Jen was shocked by the letter, unsure of what to do. She showed it to her friends, who were equally unsure. "What should we do?" asked Emily. "I don't know," said Jack, "but I think we should talk to the police before we do anything." They decided to take the letter to the police, who advised them not to respond and to keep their distance from the hooded man. The friends were relieved to have the support of the police and knew that they could finally put the nightmare behind them. But they also knew that they would never forget what happened and that the memories of that night would always stay with them. As the friends left the police station, they felt a sense of closure, knowing that the hooded man was behind bars and that they had taken the right steps to protect themselves. "Thanks for coming with me," said Jen. Turning to her friends, "I don't think I could have done this alone." "Of course, we're always here for you," said Emily, giving her a reassuring smile. "Let's go get some coffee and talk about something else," suggested Alex, trying to lighten the mood. They all agreed and walked to a nearby cafe, relieved to be surrounded by the bustle of everyday life. They talked about their work, their families, and their plans for the future, trying to push the memories of the cabin to the back of their minds. As they sipped their coffee, Jack spoke up. "You know, I've been thinking about what happened, and I feel like we should do something to help others who might be in a similar situation." "What do you mean?" asked Jen, intrigued. "I mean, we could start a support group or something for victims of stalking and abuse," said Jack, his voice firm. The friends all nodded, realizing that Jack was right. They had been through something traumatic, but they could use their experience to help others. "That's a great idea," said Emily. "I know I would have appreciated something like that when I was going through my divorce." "Let's do it," said Alex. "We can use what we went through to help others and make a difference." The friends all agreed, feeling a sense of purpose and hope for the first time in a long time. They finished their coffee and left the cafe, knowing that they had each other's backs and that they could make a difference in the world. As they walked down the street, they noticed a figure in a hooded sweatshirt following them. Their hearts raced as memories of the cabin flooded back. "Guys, do you see that?" whispered Jen, pointing to the figure. The friends quickened their pace, but the figure continued to follow them. "Let's split up," suggested Emily. "We can meet at the park in 10 minutes." The friends nodded, knowing that they had to lose their pursuer. They split up and ran in different directions, their hearts pounding in their chests. As Jen ran down an alley, she felt someone grab her from behind. She turned to face her attacker, ready to defend herself, but was shocked to see a familiar face. "David?" she gasped, recognizing the man from the hooded sweatshirt. "Jen, I'm sorry," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I just wanted to talk to you, to explain why I did what I did." Jen was stunned, unsure of what to do. She knew that David had been in love with her for years, but she had never returned his feelings. "I can't talk to you right now," she said, pulling away from him. "I need to go find my friends." David nodded, knowing that he had messed up. He watched as Jen ran down the alley, disappearing from sight. As the friends regrouped at the park, they shared their experiences, all realizing that they were being followed by someone they knew. "That's insane," said Alex. "What are the chances that we would all be followed by someone we know?" "I don't know," said Jack, "but we need to be careful. This is far from over." As the friends walked away from the park, they knew that their lives would never be the same. They had gone from victims to survivors, but the shadows of their past still haunted them. Little did they know that the real horror was yet to come, and that their lives would be forever changed by the secrets that lay hidden in the darkness.